Hi, my name is Sid Gonzales. I work for VetexAuto.com here in sunny Miami, Florida.
What's your favorite 911 generation?
Well, that's easy. For me, being around these cars for over 35 years, it has to be the 993. This is a car that was manufactured from 1994, starting in Europe, 95 for US models, up to 1998. There was a small run on the car, so there weren't many made, but the fabrication of the car was exceptional. This is the last of the what you would call air. Some guys call it the oil-cooled. I tend to think they're oil-cooled engines. They do have a big fan that helps, but it's got a lot of oil with radiators that do the cooling. Anyways, the cars were fabricated in a couple of versions. There was a beautiful Targa version that used the glass for a roof. There's the, of course, the coupe, which is solid, and the cabriolets. These cars are very reliable. Few things, you know, on the cabrio, you'll have some problem with the tops, but in general, they're solid cars. The suspension is incredible. And then, of course, there's the 993 twin turbo, which is pretty much automotive perfection from those years. And anybody that's a Porsche lover would love one of those. And so, yeah, definitely the 993 generation.
Very briefly, can you give us a breakdown of the 911 lifespan with regard to generations, starting with the first generation up to the current 997?
Absolutely. The first Porsches, or first 911s, were actually designed by Ferry Porsche's son called Bootsy. That's his nickname. I believe his first name is Wolfgang. And he was the designer of the first 911, introduced in 1964, if I get my dates right. They were introduced as a coupe, and they were also drawn as a Targa. Those were great engines in those cars. They were aluminum 2 liters. Some of them were carburetors, or most of them were carburetors until later on. Then you got a very special car that was made throughout those years, the 69 911, especially the 69 911S. This car is very valuable to collectors. It's an incredibly advanced car for the years. It had all-wheel disc at the time, a 2-liter aluminum engine with mechanical injection, and then you work yourself up to the magnesium 911s. These are the generation from 1970 till 77, starting with a 2.2 all the way to a 2.7 liter magnesium block. Now these cars, there were a lot of them made. Some of them are very short runs, like the Carreras from 74 to 75. Porsche experimented a lot with materials in those years. That's very interesting, especially like coming into 1977 when they started fabricating the 3-liter aluminum block, which is pretty much one of the best motors they've ever made as far as we're concerned. They were introduced in production in 78 all the way to 83, and everybody loves the 3 liters. They're reliable, they're fun, and you can get a lot of power if you know, with the right stuff going on them. From then on, we go to our 84 through 89 generation, which is what we call the 911 Carrera generation. And by the way, the word Carrera is used on any 911 that Porsche produces with 200 horses or more. And that is why you see everything as a Carrera now. Where you went back to 83, the SC had 180 horses, so it never made the Carrera name. Another secret, 77 Carrera was a 3-liter with 204 horses that was made by Porsche with a 2.7 crank. All right, coming back to 84 through 89, we saw the displacement go to 3.2. In 84 through 86, they kept the original 915 transmission, along with the engines acquired a new injection system called the Motronics, a little bit more advanced, better fuel efficiency, and so on. In the old body type, which is what insiders call it, the 87 through 89 Carrera is usually the most favorable one of all of them, because it's a product that's been developed over a couple of decades, and they pretty much got it right. And it's got a hydraulic clutch, which helps with driving, and well, pretty much bulletproof. You know, really great car. 87 through 89 Carreras. These cars are special because it's got the 3.2 motor with almost 240 horses versus the pre-87, but more importantly, it's got the G50 transmission, which is a hydraulic clutch transmission, and it's a very great tranny, very reliable. We rebuilt very little of them because they last quite a long time. After the 89, right in the middle of 89, Porsche introduced the what we call the 964 line. That line came in 1989 with a all-wheel drive car as a production car. Very good, very well made, and that line lasted up to 1994. In those years, they developed not only the three 3.6s that they used on those engines, but they also developed a 3.3 turbo in 1991 and a very valuable 3.6 turbo in the 93-94 years, which are exceptional cars and very valuable and very sought after. And of course, after that, you get my favorite, the 993s till 98. In the end of 98, they came out with the Boxsters and the new Carreras, which are the 996. This is the first time Porsche is going to water cool their 911s or their mid and rear engine cars. Pretty good cars, not as sought after or reliable, I would say, but still a good product. A lot of fun to drive, a superior air conditioning system to all the previous Porsches, and a lot easier to get in and out of, more comfortable. So they did make a bigger car, more modern brakes, and when well maintained, they're extremely reliable cars. In the middle of 05, Porsche introduced their next generation of Carreras, which is titled the 997. They've introduced it with a 3.6 motor in the Carrera and a 3.8 on the Carrera S. These cars share a lot of components with the 996s, but there were little changes in the design. And those are built from 05 till 08. In the beginning of 08, or in the middle of 08, Porsche introduced the second generation 997. And that's where we're at now, which is in 09 through 12. You get a better made motor because it's got 30% less components. And Porsche went back to a little bit of the old school in the fabrication of the interior, and still a superb cars. And they have a lot of versions, so we could be here all day, but they got the GT2s, they got the GT3s, they got the new GTSs, and there's a lot of in Porsche's collection. So we'll be supporting all those cars with, and we know that they're going to need rebuild parts, they're going to need suspension parts, so, and of course brakes and all the maintenance stuff that we do.
Are there any tips you can give to 911 owners on how to extend the life of their car?
Absolutely. The 911, especially the old ones, the sun is a no-no for anyone that's doing a restoration or has any of these cars that are in excellent condition, because the value is affected dramatically by the elements. I know it's common sense, and I just want to make sure that that's understood. Maintenance, the key is maintenance. When something makes noise, you got to investigate it, you got to repair it, get it going. If you have any of these cars that we're using them frequently, then your brakes and any other suspension stuff has to be maintained, and they'll last forever basically, but maintenance is the key. The right treatment, the right equipment.
Do convertibles tend to have unusually high amounts of problems?
Well, if we go back to the aired/oil-cooled Porsches, even the up to 89 ones that were an electric top, the cabriolets they sealed very well. Again, we go back to maintenance. The seals do have a lifespan. When the seals are new, the cabin seals very well, and very little moisture or water gets in, if at all. On a Targa from the same year, inherently it never seals right. You can only get it to seal so much. So you're always going to have some kind of wind or moisture getting into the cabin because of that. That's just from the design of the car. But other than that, they're solid cars.
Do you prefer to keep 911 stock, or do you are you a fan of modifications?
Well, me personally, I am a believer that the more original your car is, the more it's worth, the more reliable it's going to be. Porsche in itself makes very reliable cars. Sometimes people overlook the fact that these guys know what they're doing, and they design a car to certain specs, and there's a reason for that. Remember earlier I talked about endurance. Porsche fabricates, and Porsche's, I believe, philosophy has always been the long term, the endurance. If you look at their racing records, the 24 hours of Le Mans, Daytona, Sebring 12 hours, that's the idea, where you have a product that you can, you know, take off from here in Miami, drive it up to California, turn off the engine, you know, get a cupcake and drive it back home and nothing happens. And that's the idea. So the more original and the more maintained the car is, the more reliable it's always going to be. If you have one of these cars with modifications, you might get more power, which is exciting. And of course, anybody and everybody knows that there's never enough power. So I understand that completely, but with that comes, you know, more failures. You turbocharge a motor that's not designed to be turbocharged, you're going to blow something. It's almost normal physics, I guess. But yeah, naturally aspirated cars, you want to keep them naturally aspirated and try to keep them original. And Porsche has a lot of support there with original parts, and we do as well. And you know, that's the way to do it.
Which car do you regret selling?
Well, I did have an SC for a while, which was a lot of fun. We was almost like a guinea pig for us when we were growing up. We learned a lot on it. It was owned by a friend of mine, and he kind of, you know, saw that I liked it and he didn't need it, so he kind of passed it on to me, and that was exciting. We worked a lot and learned a lot on that car. It was the 3-liter motor which we rebuilt and tore up and all that. So I miss that car. I miss not driving it a lot, you know, and those cars, when you have the right roads to go on, they're fantastic. They're fantastic drivers.
What body style of vehicle are you fond of? Like a hatchback, wagon, convertible, coupe, sedan?
Well, every time I think of a car, there's certain cars that I think of first, and brands as well. So when it comes to sports car, it's definitely Porsche, of course. A coupe. In the Porsche world, a coupe is the car to have. Cabriolets, especially in Miami, are incredibly fun. The Targas are flexible because you can open up your roof. But as far as reliability, less components that might go bad down the line, definitely a coupe.